Hey guys, my name is Bruce Hoyer, and I want to thank you guys for kind of combining ideas, I guess, if you will, for gyms. And so this will be our second gym that we're doing as almost like an affiliation group. And so the nice thing that I like is that you guys get the same training that we would get at our gym, essentially. And so it's really kind of different in the way that we do classes, but I really like it. So just to give you guys a breakdown of what we're going to do is it's a flipped classroom style. So essentially, you'll watch the videos that you do before you come in. And with that, you should have a decent idea of how to do that technique. I don't expect you to know it 100%, so don't feel like you have to watch it 20 or 30 times, right? I want you to watch it a couple times. They're really short videos. There's one that's a super long one in the beginning that's like 20-some minutes. And then after that, it's like maybe 1.5, 2-minute videos. And it's just showing the technique very quickly. And I tried not to go into a ton of detail with it just because I want it to be, something fast to where if you guys forget to do it before class, you can do that. So the format that I want you guys, or that I would like you guys to do, is essentially for the first about 20 minutes of class, you guys will be going through those, techniques. Now you can do it one of two ways. You can go and take 4 techniques and just drill each one of those, and then, or you can take, 10 or 12 techniques and you can do it, a couple times. Some people like doing it that way. In my opinion, that's actually a little bit better way rather than doing 4, for an extended period of time. That you'll come to find this about me as a coach. I really like adding in a bunch of stuff and doing it a few times so you guys understand concepts more than that. Just, a couple things. And now what is tough about this side of things is that once you start drilling a technique, 50, 60, 70 times, you start to feel really good with it, right? And so, but it's a little bit of a diminishing return, if you will, because once you start to really get that technique and it looks good and everything like that, I want you to start building facets off of that as well. Because otherwise, if you do that and you just continue to rep that technique, you're really not gaining much more off of that, right? And it might even be getting worse because, you're not putting like full thought into it. In other words, think of driving. Like when you were 14 in South Dakota, we drive when we're 14. In Iowa, I think it's 16. When you guys were first driving, like everything was super tense and you were, in here and like looking at everything, make sure to be extra special careful about every single little thing, right? And so that was you really learning that skill. Now that you've probably been driving for a few years, it's if you notice, you've got a diminishing return on all that learning. In other words, there was a peak time before when you were completely scared and 14 and a terrible driver to the point where you got like almost your maximum return on driving. And then now it probably slipped back just a little bit because now you're almost bored with it, right? So where your mind starts wandering, maybe you're texting and driving, which is a terrible thing, eating, all this other stuff. Now you're doing all these additional tasks because you're bored with that initial task. And that's kind of how learning happens as well, where, when you first start, it's like, oh man, I have to think about every single process. And then you'll get to a point where you feel comfortable with that. And then once you determine that you feel comfortable with that technique, I'd like you to start adding things to it as well. Maybe you're going to take it back one step and say, okay, let me try to put a pass into this technique. Maybe it's, say, like an armbar from mount. Okay, let me take this armbar from mount. This feels good. I'm going to now try to incorporate a pass directly into this armbar from mount, right? Because if I don't do that and I just keep repping that armbar from mount, like I said, eventually my brain is going to get bored with it. And you're going to start diminishing some of those returns a little bit on that. Or like I said, even worse, to where you start skipping steps just because you're getting lazy with it again. So I think that's the biggest difference, is that now you guys are in charge of your own learning, if you will. And that's going to be tough to get at first, but then after a while, it creates this really cool system where the coach, myself and the guys that are going to be senior to you, really need to come in and kind of tinker with the game rather than like trying to show things. Like, you should be already learning a lot of the basic stuff through videos, books, things like that. And then the advanced person gets to come in and kind of tinker. So the format that I would like you guys doing is essentially having, and this is the way that we do it at our gym, is having 2 lines of people, and ideally what it would be is alternate a newer person with an advanced person, right? And then you simply pick one side. Like we have a window side and a wall side, and we say, okay, wall side today is moving, and they move. So each person does a technique, and then that person on the wall side moves over one, and then just keeps rotating down. So the other side never moves, and then the first that, in this instance, the wall side, or, if you want to call it person A, person B, we do that as well. Person A would move, and they go to the next person, and then you'll get another person coming in. And so the nice part with that is that you'll get a new person and then an advanced person, right after that. So you can kind of help somebody that's newer than you, and then after that, you'll get an advanced person that's been coming longer than you, and they can maybe help you with their techniques. So once you guys get through and feel really comfortable with everything on level 1.1, or excuse me, level 1.1, I want you guys to create a video if you could, and then send that to me, right? So we'll put it up to where it's a little bit easier to do. Maybe you can do it on YouTube or things like that. I take my own here, but we'll try to figure out a method that way. And then I want to watch those. So I want you to do them one time, right? One time each. And the idea isn't like a pass-fail. It's essentially, you'll go through all those techniques, and with that, I just want to see that they're decent. And if you miss 3 or 4 of them, no big deal. Basically, you'll just go over those until I feel comfortable with them, and then we move on to level 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and go from there. So that's the way that I want to keep it, and basically just you learn those techniques and then move on. Now, it probably seems like a lot of the techniques are kind of hodgepodge all over the place, and that's with some intention, basically. The reason is that it should be 2 techniques from pretty much every basic position to start, and then later on it's 2 techniques from every advanced position. So the idea behind that is that in a lot of the coaching and learning stuff that I've seen, the interference between 2 techniques. So in other words, if you learn like an Americana and a Kimura at the same time, a lot of coaches teach that way. But what happens is when you do that, you sometimes get muddled between the 2 techniques because they're so very similar, right? So what we do instead is you're going to learn one technique from that position, and I want you to really work that one. That one should be your number 1 technique from that position, because it's pretty much the only one you know. And then after a while of like a month or 2, we're going to go ahead and add in another technique to that position, and now you have 2. But there shouldn't be as much interference at that time because you've really cemented that first technique, if you will. So that's the reason that we're doing that. And then you'll see us come in and say, okay, like 1.2 is you learning one submission from a bunch of different positions, right? So maybe you've learned armbar from guard. Now you're going to learn armbar from mount, armbar from guard, armbar from back, because it's really the same technique, just done from different positions, right? So that's the kind of the idea behind a lot of that. So those are the kind of the levels in a nutshell. And like I said, I want you guys doing that for the first 20 minutes. Now, if you're brand new, you've never trained before at all, what I want you guys doing is continuing to work on those really until you reach a level of ability. Basically, like once you've gone through level 1.1 and you feel comfortable with that and you're on level 1.2, I'd like to have you move over to the other group, but you don't have to. The second group, what I want you guys doing for that last 20, 25 minutes of class is splitting it up into 3 groups, or 3 time frames, if you will. 8 minutes each, right? So, or if you want to call it 4 minutes per person, you can do it that way as well. So let's call it 4 minutes per person, right? You go in there, your first 4-minute session should be you trying to get to like an advantageous position. So in other words, you pick a position in your head for that week and you say, okay, I'm trying to get to top half guard, or I'm trying to get to bottom half guard, anything that can be offensive. The only ones that I don't want are the defensive positions. So in other words, like, bottom mount, bottom, or like inside the back, things like that, where you're in a negative position, right? So you're trying to start from standing, and then you're trying to go into an offensive position. Once you get into an offensive position, you can say, hey, that's the one I was trying to get to. Thanks. And then another person comes in and goes against you, right? And so don't tell that person what position you're trying to get into. I wanted to try to keep it as live as possible, right? But that's what you're doing, is you're trying to get into that position that you're trying to work. So the second set of these, right? And so essentially it'd be you doing that for 4 minutes, your partner doing that for 4 minutes with a bunch of different people, right? And then the second set is you working from one position for that week. So maybe you're working top half guard, bottom half guard, back control, inside the back control. Now this one, you can work from a bad position, right? It's almost good for you too. But then I want you to basically have, like a lot of guys will work on bottom side control. So for that whole week, or even more if you choose to make it more, you'll be working on basically having everybody on top of you, and like they'll be on top side control, you're bottom side control, and you're just trying to working on getting out, right? So getting into guard, half guard, whatever. So that gives you a lot of repetition on that one particular position, right? And you're trying to get better at that one particular position. So you'll go through that for 4 minutes. Your partner will go through that for 4 minutes. And again, people will be circling in, so it won't be you going against that same person, right? Once you get done with one person, then you find another person that's available, and you go with them, and they'll tell you what position they're doing, okay? So you should be moving all around through the gym. Third round is going to be submissions, right? And so I want you to start with about a submission about 50% on. Like, so maybe rear naked choke, triangle, armbar, things like that. And you can do it from any position. I don't care what position you do it from, but it just has to be one submission. And so say it's armbar. I want to start in almost like a spider web position. Like my best thing would be EBI, right? So you start with an advantageous, like pretty much an armbar position, right? But then both of you guys are trying to work out of that. Now the goal isn't for the person with the submission to immediately just grip and put it on and call it a done day and feel good about yourself. What I want is for there to be a little bit of play in between you guys in order to try to figure out, okay, if I'm trying to armbar and I can't get an armbar, boom, I can go to a triangle. If I'm trying to armbar and he stacks me, boom, I can go underneath, things like that, right? So it should be good for both people that, one, the other person's working the defense, and two, you're learning avenues to be able to do off of that submission, and then just trying to get that submission better as well, right? So those are the 3 rounds. So again, entries into your dominant position, working on your dominant position, and then a submission. And if it's from the dominant position, great. But if it's not, no big deal either. But like those are, in my opinion, kind of like the 3 avenues for jiu-jitsu. You got to figure out a way to get into there. You got to figure out something to do from there, and you got to get a finish, right? So that's my thoughts. That would pretty much end the last 24 minutes in class, and then after that, you'll just do regular rolling, things like that. So I'm super excited about this. I'm also probably going to create either like a Facebook group. We have Slack, which is an app that you can use online. It's just like a messenger service that you guys can contact me and say, hey, I'm having problems with this and this and this. Help me out with this. I would be more than happy to do that. We just have to figure out what the best way for that is. Then also I wouldn't be opposed to doing some online classes as well, because I have a lot of video equipment here that we can just put something up and do like a live stream via Facebook, and then you guys ask me questions and things like that. So thank you guys very much.